Well, breathing is an example of involuntary action, while chewing is an example of voluntary action. There are differences and similarities between voluntary and involuntary actions. The similarity is both actions involve stimulation, impulse, neuron, and an effector organ. Other than that, the first difference between voluntary action and involuntary action is voluntary action is actions that we are conscious of and done on our own will, while involuntary action is the actions that occur automatically and occurs without us being conscious. Next, voluntary action involves the somatic nervous system, while involuntary action involves the autonomous nervous system. Lastly, voluntary action involves the reaction of the skeletal muscles, while involuntary action involves the reaction of the smooth muscle and glands. Since we are discussing about skeletal muscle involving voluntary actions, can somebody give an example?
I can! There are so many daily activities that are voluntary action involving skeletal muscles such as walking, running, solving a question, and other conscious activities. So, let me take solving a question as an example to explain how this action works. First, stimulus occurs when we see the question. Next, our receptor will receive the stimulus and transmits the nerve impulse to the cerebrum to sensory neuron. The cerebrum will interpret the nerve impulse to be sent to the effector. After that, the effector receives the information, in this case, solution to the question. Lastly, we will write down the answer of the question as a response. That's all about how a voluntary actions involving skeletal muscles work. For information, these actions are controlled by cerebral cortex. Hence, our perception of the surrounding can be produced. Moving on, let's talk about skeletal muscle involving involuntary action.
One of the examples is twin neuron reflex arc, which is a reflex action that involves sensory neuron, biliary neuron, and motor neuron. For example, when a finger is pricked by a sharp pain, the sensory receptor detects the stimulus and trigger a nerve impulse. The nerve impulse is transmitted along the sensory neuron to the biliary neuron, then to motor neuron. The motor neuron will transfer the nerve impulse from the spinal cord to the effector so that the finger can be moved quickly. The importance of reflex action is to produce spontaneous response without waiting for instruction from the brain to reduce injury taken. Wait, I seem to forgot what is two neuron reflex arc. Does anyone remember it?
I remember it. The two neurons involved in this action is sensory neuron and motor neuron. The knee-jerk reflex or patellar reflex is a deep tender reflex seen as a sudden kicking movement of the lower leg in response to a sharp tap on the patellar tendon. When the tendon below the kneecap is knocked, the quadriceps muscle stretches and stimulates the stretch receptors to trigger nerve impulses. After that, the sensory neuron transmits the nerve impulses to the motor neuron in the spinal cord. The motor neuron will then transmit impulses from the spinal cord to the quadriceps muscle. The quadriceps muscle contracts, causing the leg to jerk to the front. Sometimes, doctor tests the effectiveness of someone's nerve system by tapping on the knee using a rubber hammer. That is all about voluntary, involuntary, and reflex actions. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to know about diseases related to the nervous system, please watch to the fourth and final part.